Hello there, my Gummy Knights, and welcome back to the Echo Chamber. Now, I know, it's been a while since I've, pretty much made anything related to a video. And I do apologize for that, but, I mean, what are you gonna do? You guys don't want to hear any type of excuses. Just know I am working on some stuff in the pipeline, okay? But I had to put this one out. I'm sorry, I can't let it slide. This one has to go out before any other video. Why? Because in the big 2025, we are still being this brain dead. I thought the conversation was over like back in December. You know, when Death Battle made their final attempt of nonsense? I thought this conversation was over, but apparently a minority of YouTubers and people who are in the YouTube space have decided to come out since the new Superman movie is out and say that, oh, let's look at 2025 Superman versus Goku. One in particular that we're going to be studying today because, trust me,
he needs to be studied.
At the amount of incompetence that went into making this video, I mean, it's just bizarre. It's just bizarre that this is the conclusion that you reach based on the evidence that you so-called presented. And I use evidence very loosely. That term is loose with this man because there's practically no evidence whatsoever to come to the conclusion that he has done. Using tired arguments that were tired back in 2015, 10 years. This man is so behind the times, he's still using 10-year-old arguments. This is absolutely ridiculous. That is besides the point. We're going to get into Low Take's video of Superman versus Goku. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, guys. Goku is slamming. I did many videos on it. Multiple people have done many videos on it. And unless something drastically changes with Superman, unless he has some consistent, high-tier feats that make him even remotely close to even hyperversal, let alone outerversal, but it's just going to be a deep dive into Low Take's video and his contradictions out the wazoo, because a lot of the arguments he's going to sit there and use to try to game Superman to be in at certain levels that he so clearly is not are going to be a lot of the arguments he dismisses when it comes to Goku, and using those type of things for Goku in terms of his argumentation. And because I don't want to make this video exorbitantly long, I'm going to just sit there and go point by point, because he has a lot of fluff in this video that just is unnecessary and doesn't pertain to anything related to this debate. So I'm just going to sit there and go point by point for each characters, so that way we can go ahead and get it decided as to what he got wrong and even what he got right. Or at least if there's a grain of half-truth in there, we can expound upon it a little bit. My counter evidence for this video isn't going to be in the macro, it's going to be in the minor, because I'm going to be using a lot of his own arguments to debunk him as well. So it's going to make it a lot easier on me because I don't have to actually do or try as hard. Besides, if you guys want to see more in-depth research videos of mine that kind of explains these characters' power levels and things of that nature, I have a myriad of videos on my channel, including other debunks that go further into the data of why people like Goku are so strong. I mean, this is going to be especially crucial for when we get to the part in his video and the nature of good faith that comes from that new argument that could be played out when you're talking about Goku specifically. Anyway, like I said, without further ado, let's go on and get into this.
Now, for the longest time, scaling Superman was an absolute mess due to the constantly changing continuities and cosmology of DC Comics. Superman the character had been rebooted multiple times between the Golden, Silver Age, Crisis events, and New 52, each time becoming a technically brand new character with his own independent scaling that did not inherently make him as strong as previous incarnations. So, for example, a feat of Superman breaking through the limits of infinity in an old comic did not necessarily scale to the current Superman because they were literally different guys. However, due to recent changes in DC Comics, this is no longer an issue. You see, the event Dark Knight's Death Metal was a soft reboot of DC, establishing parts of the cosmology that had formerly been removed, but more importantly, combined all memories and experiences of characters from all previous incarnations into their present versions. In other words, this Superman, at least mentally and experience-wise, is literally every single mainline Superman that has ever come before. Now,
and the infamous Dark Knight panel. Like, that's the first thing that you are absolutely insane for using, because for the umpteenth time, keep in mind, any of you can look on the screen, and I will have the screenshot on the screen itself, but any of you can just look on the screen and see that it's not what he says that it says, okay? When people sit there and get this misconstrued, I mean, this is where I talk about the nature of bad faith. Now, this is going to go more so into the Dragon Ball side. Once we get to that, we're going to elaborate, but this is what I'm talking about, the nature of bad faith, because to kind of like jump into this a little bit, we're going to be charitable on two fronts. fronts. I'm going to be charitable in the sense that I'm going to actually allow this composite Superman to actually exist. And we're going to explain why it's a composite Superman right now. The idea that DC themselves are writing Superman as a coherent Superman towards the nature of all previous versions being interconnected, which is the most charitable, good faith interpretation that you can have with that. That's about as charitable as you can possibly be to try to grant Superman some of this higher scaling that he clearly doesn't have. That's not what the panel says. It specifically talks about the multiverse. If you guys saw the portion of the video that I played about the interconnected histories that Lotex tries to take from this, no, what the Pacific panel says to Wonder Woman, from the other Wonder Woman, is that the multiverse has been restored. That everything within the multiverse, all the histories and stuff of the multiverse, has been once again interconnected and set once and for all. That's what it says. It doesn't say that, oh, post-crisis, Silver Age, New 52, Rebirth Superman, all of them are now fused into one, and he has all of their histories and memories. Because last time I checked, when was Superman ever black? You see, Clark Kent's never been black. You see, you can't do that. Now, people tried to sit there and be bad faith and say that, oh, well, it doesn't mean everything because alternate universes and Elseworld stories still exist. It's like, no, because if we read it the way that you guys read it, all histories have been infused into one. Meaning that Superman should obviously have every feat that King Obama Superman has, that Val Zod Superman has. And the reason why I put those two in is not because I'm a racist or anything. It's because they have a clear component that makes them so abruptly and obviously different that you can't help but say that, well, you have to be ignoring this somewhere. And it almost makes it look like you should read the statement in context. The statement is that the multiverse has been restored. Not that we all live in one singular universe now. And keep in mind, this goes further, and even Lotex, again, one of his contradictions is that he contradicts his own statement by pointing out that they still use the 52 original multiverse map. That is still prevalent inside of DC. And in fact, DC still relies on multiverse continuity and possibilities. Lotex is going to go further and bring this up and try to scale Superman to it. So I'm like, why would you in the first place sit here and make this lie that everything's interconnected when we still have a multiverse? That's the whole point of this statement, is that the multiverse in its originality has been restored. So all those universes that have been long since forgotten, or all those universes that had no tie into DC's canon because they were something separate in this entirety, have now been interconnected together under one multiverse and under one banner. But it is still a multiverse. The size, the elements, all things can be utilized. But however, you can be charitable and try to say, well, let's go with your interpretation. And now we have a composite Superman. And because if we're going off of your interpretation, including Lote's words himself, this by definition would be a composite Superman. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we're going to get into a special statement for Dragon Ball a little bit later that he brings up in his video. But the reason why I'm saying that this is naturally not a benefit to him is because what's going to come next once we get to the Dragon Ball section. But again, the debunk is very simple. That's not what the panel actually says, and any of you can just read it because that's not what it says. But at the same time, we're also going to be looking at it pretty charitably.
This wouldn't necessarily correlate to power, except for the fact that this brand new reborn Superman has repeatedly stated that his mind and body are both stronger than they have ever been before. And things like distance, matter, and space-time are mostly meaningless to him, meaning
okay.
That this Superman, if it wasn't obvious, scales to literally any other feat that a mainline Superman has ever done that you've ever heard of.
What? What the fuck?
Lifting the Book of Infinite Pages,
Easy debunk here. He never actually lifted the Book of Infinite Pages. Neither him nor Shazam did that. And by the way, even if you wanted to consider that feat, it's a shared feat. Let's say that they did lift it. It would be a shared feat. Now, I know. People are going to say, well, infamously, the affinity divided by infinity is still infinity. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's cool and all. But again, it's still a shared feat, which means that Superman cannot really approach the levels of infinity by himself if you want to sit there and consider that. But that's besides the point. Easy debunk here is that they didn't even lift it. And not to mention, you still have the Ultraman statement, which people have tried to sit there and try to debunk, but there's no real good evidence for debunk. So it's not really this big, huge feat that Superman would really scale to in any conceivable way that would make it matter in a debate like this. I mean, especially when you consider the fact that this isn't a lifting competition to begin with, this is a striking competition. So it doesn't matter if Superman can bench press more than Goku. Can he outpunch him? That would be the question. So again, it's irrelevant. I don't know why he's bringing it up.
Say consistently because, like any comic book character, Superman has showings and feats that are either drastically exceeding or substantially less impressive than those feats. However, over the years, we've been given a multitude of explanations as to why Superman's strength may seemingly vary. Sometimes it's just that he's holding back, other times it's because he's not in the proper mental state to harness his abilities, and other times he's simply not experiencing enough stress, which allows him to absorb even more solar energy and make himself stronger.
You serious?
Therefore, any Superman feat that caps him below Universal was Clark just not being locked in enough. And
you gotta love how he legitimately only gives so-called 3 examples, which, by the way, those examples are very, yikes. But keep in mind, it's not that I'm disagreeing with this point necessarily. He's right, but this is one of those half-truths, because there are times where Superman just can't do things because he can't do things. And anytime he's been shown lower than Universal when he's going all out, which there have been multiple times where he actually is going all out and still been shown lower than Universal, it's not like you're gonna sit there and just say, well, this doesn't matter because, well, Superman's just not locked in enough. No, you can't sit there and not take the good with the bad. I mean, because these are the same people, and again, he's gonna do the same thing to Goku, where you're gonna take his statements, you're gonna take his feats, and then try to low-scale them just because he doesn't believe in them. This is his argument, by the way. We're gonna, like I said, we're getting more to the Goku side later, so I don't want to do it so much here because that's where you get the main debunks. But even here on the Superman side, he's not necessarily wrong, but it's a half-truth. Yeah, Superman does hold back a lot. I mean, come on, that's just kind of obvious. Again, I think Animated Superman said it the best, right? You live in a world made of cardboard. I mean, what are you going to do? You don't want to sit there and use all of your power at once because of the likelihood that you can injure somebody who you don't want to injure. So, of course, Superman does hold back. However, there have been consistent showings also for Superman where he isn't holding back and he hasn't been shown to be able to do things in the Universal tier. Now, the reason why I'm not going to sit here and prod on this point as though it's a debunk is because I would agree. Superman does consistently scale within those Universal ranges of power. In fact, he scales actually consistently a lot higher now, especially if you're taking more modern comics into question there when it comes to his scaling of power. So consistently, I wouldn't even call Superman's bare minimum Universal. So I actually disagree with Low Takes there. I would say that Superman actually scales a little bit higher as a bare minimum. He's definitely within those low multiversal ranges at the bare minimum, but he can also scale even higher. We're going to get a little bit more into that later, but yeah. It's more of a half-truth, so not really something big or a big issue, but just kind of like a, well, you know, whatever, just don't lowball it too much.
Starting with the Phantom Zone. Now, the Phantom Zone, as you may know, is usually used as a prison outside of reality where Superman or other characters can send threats that can't be contained anywhere else. But it's actually far more impressive than that. To make an incredibly convoluted, constantly changing and evolving cosmology as simple as possible, this is the map of the DC multiverse that is still being pretty consistently followed and literally shown in recent comics. The big circle in the middle is the entire DC multiverse made of physical matter as we understand it. While it does say there are 52 universes there, it's been further expanded upon that there are indeed an infinite number, and that these 52 specifically are just connected via a vibrational frequency as a quote-unquote local multiverse.
Before he gets further into his Phantom Zone scaling, you know, I'm stopping it right here because, again, this only proves my earlier point about how DC's cosmology is still working around the old prism that everyone likes to seemingly throw out the window and say that, no, DC can scale you way to outerversal and infinitely above and all these things, when they're still using the same structure when it comes to the confines of the multiverse, and even further proving my Dark Knight Metal's point. But that's the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because again, I told you, Lotex is going to sit there and kind of debunk himself. He contradicts himself.
Stated by writers both in and out of comics, each and every one of these universes are made up of an infinite amount of higher and lower spatial dimensions, which are not to be confused with alternate universes. All of these places are below the next level of the cosmology, which is the God Sphere, with numerous places within the God Sphere being stated to be beyond the bounds of space, time, and the concept of place entirely.
Yes, I love it! He's got nothing!
Now, keep in mind, I know that he is referencing this in order to try to sit there and scale Superman to these things because he's trying to interconnect his scaling for the Phantom Zone into it, but the problem is none of that is relevant and none of it matters, and not only does Superman not really scale to these higher tier places, now don't get me wrong, we'll get into his Phantom Zone thing later, but he doesn't really scale to these higher places, not in reference to anything, especially with the stuff he quote-unquote put on screen, because heaven being, or the fourth heaven, as is described in the panel, being a place without place, doesn't really mean anything because the concept of place is not really a concept that is anywhere near abstractional concepts, which would grant you that outerversal scaling that people like to, you know, put up there when you transcend an actual fundamental concept of the universe itself. This isn't the same thing as space. The concept of space is something that merely differentiates itself from having a mere space of an area. Essentially, it's greater significance, which is what it says in that panel. The description of heaven is differentially different from something like the description of Earth. It's a fundamental different place, which is what happens when you just simply even Google the concept of space. That refers to something geographical in terms of its difference from just having another mere space. It has an imbuement of significant meaning. Heaven in DC has significant meaning. So, trying to sit there and say that, oh, well, Superman scales above concepts, he scales above concepts, is ridiculous based on that criteria, because the concept of place means virtually nothing in terms of actual scaling.
Its own statements that it is infinite, endless, boundless, without dimensions, timeless, and distanceless.
No more, no more.
I mean, like this, like I said, it's gonna get more when we get to the Dragon Ball side, because he just simply tried to appropriate that towards Superman's power level as this infinite realm that is boundless, a voided space of nothingness, infinite nothingness that exists beyond conceptual boundlessness. Now, he doesn't say conceptual boundlessness, but that seems to be the implication there. But here's the problem is, keep in mind, Dragon Ball has this too. I'm going to actually put up on screen how the Phantom Zone connects with another Pacific realm and has the same exact statements. This is something that Lotex doesn't even use to try to scale Goku. Keep in mind, he doesn't even use it at all. But he's going to willing to take this statement from DC just on its face value and then just try to apply it to Superman as though it's everywhere been shown consistent.
And more recently, Superman outright shakes the Phantom Zone and states that he could destroy the entire Phantom Zone if he wanted to. But ultimately chooses against it. In other words, Superman can already destroy spaces that are limitless and beyond the limitations of an infinite dimensional structure. But
all right, I gotta leave, okay?
John, we just started. Come on, man.
Listen, there's a lot to see in this life. Not wasting it here.
the source wall itself already being beyond every prior mentioned reality and dimension existing before all of it, which would again include the Phantom Zone. This is important because Superman in various contexts has fought, beaten, or overpowered characters empowered by the source or something similar. He's
Here we go.
beaten Metallo while powered by a source-fueled mother box, punched a Brainiac who had literally traveled beyond the source, has fought and beaten multiple characters powered by the anti-life equation, which is literally the yin to the yang of the source, and has affected the source wall in and of itself on multiple occasions.
Again, the problem is that this scales Superman nowhere. This is what I'm talking about in his lack of evidence. Now, it's not that you can't say that Superman has done it, but what portion of the source or the anti-life equation was being used for that character? You can't say it was the whole thing without any type of substantiation or proof. Again, I can just dismiss him via Hitchens' razor. He doesn't actually have any proof to substantiate the claim that it was the entirety of the source, making the feat impressive. Any proportion of the source that can be used. And not to mention, what does that even mean? So a character who's gone beyond the source. Okay? And? How does that scale Superman? Again, this is the problem with Low takes. He takes ambiguous statements. He uses these fallacious argumentations and takes ambiguity to try to scale Superman, but he won't even give that slight credit to Goku. Every single solitary feat that Goku has must be looked at with severe scrutiny and must be lowballed to the highest degree. His belief is being taken as he is the source and therefore can make this judgment. Keep in mind, his video is titled Goku vs. Superman, the final answer. So it's not like he's saying, in my opinion, Goku vs. Superman. He's saying that this is the final answer, as in there's never going to be a video that can come and debunk this. There's never going to be. Everything that he puts in here is just well-researched, well-evident, and it's just obvious. Anybody denying it's just a stupid idiot. Okay, you're just a glazer. But keep in mind, again, he presents no substantial evidence towards his claim that would scale Superman to any significance from the feats that he's presenting here. And he doesn't even want to go further because he knows he can't go further. The idea that I'm going to go further. There is no going further. Because Superman, other than these feats that you're showing and his comparison to people who have, quote unquote, had the source inside of them or had a portion of the source's power inside of them, doesn't really scale him anywhere. And then we have feats that contradict him being scaled towards that level consistently, even within modern comics. So it's not like you can sit there and just appropriate that across the board. And again, he tells us nothing. He doesn't substantiate as to whether or not that portion of whatever they're using from the source is significant enough to scale Superman literally anywhere. Again, I'm not trying to take it away from him. I'm not even trying to take the feats away from him. In fact, I'm gonna be as charitable as possible and just grant that it was a significant enough portion of the source to make Superman scale into those higher dimensional levels, if you want to consider the source a higher dimensional place.
Despite being a manga character that only has one original text to draw from, in modern times, talking about the power of Goku is nearly as complicated as talking about Superman. Do you mean manga or anime Goku? The anime with or without filler? Does that include the movies? Is that both the Super and Z movies? What about the video games? Even literally this week, as I was writing this video, Toyotaro, the illustrator and part writer of of the Dragon Ball Super manga, stated that he likes to think that everything official is more or less canon, but that even he isn't the one who decides what is canon to Dragon Ball, and that fans should decide for themselves what is or isn't canon. He even brings up Dragon Ball Online, something made way before Dragon Ball Super, that contradicts pretty much every other series, as something that he personally thinks is canon to himself. So,
and this is the crux of what I am talking about, and about why this argument doesn't even matter, and about why, if you're going to sit there and take a composite of Superman, and you want to be as good faith as possible when you take that composite of Superman, well, you automatically now have to take a composite of Goku. Why? Because essentially, everything is canon in Dragon Ball. Everything is canon. It's just based off of your interpretation. You, as the fan, can essentially have, because, as pointed out in the statement itself, that Toriyama, God rest his soul, was a bit of a mess when it came to continuity, and would often just go with stories that popped up into his head, rather than think about how they fit into the canon when in regards to the characters themselves, and sometimes it can make the continuity a bit fudgy. Now, don't get me wrong, as much as I respect Toriyama, as much as I love him to death, that is kind of true. There is going to be some things that come up in Dragon Ball's continuity that is a bit wacky or out of whack, and I can understand from a writing perspective that Toriyama really thought from his idea that it was more interesting to come up with fun and unique stories, rather than trying to see how they all fit into one unique canon, and in fact, they never even really use a determinate canon or order and structure, as shown in the statement itself, and even Toriyama echoes this very point towards the idea that everything is kind of just canon. Takes points out that even stuff like Dragon Ball Online is quote-unquote considered canon to Toyotaro. That's something that he would utilize or even reference. So, here comes the big issue and problem. If you're going to take a composite Superman and say, well, the writers, let's keep in mind, Takes himself points out how multiple writers have been influenced towards Superman's story in regards to the canonicity, specifically around Superman's scaling when it comes to spatial dimensions, and that multiple writers have agreed. He's only ever shown one, he didn't show multiple, but I'm just going to be charitable with him. I'm not trying to do what he's doing and take the arguments for Goku in bad faith, but multiple writers, so that means that even though they clearly don't share the same mind, they don't share the same structure, and have shown inconsistencies between Superman, even when they're talking about the same arc that they have Superman in, if there's another writer on it, it is going to be a different writer, and they're going to tell the story differently. However, just saying that they all try to keep it consistent, well, here we go. The network behind current Dragon Ball has essentially said the same exact thing. The idea that everything is kind of canon, and just interconnected in its own continuity, and whatever you think. You have games like Heroes, when you have games like Xenoverse and things of that nature, which shows Goku and them scaling to infinite dimensional, scaling beyond boundless, scaling constantly to these out-of-versal structures and realms, shaking boundaries of infinity. I mean, when you got CC Goku and all them, you kind of lose the weeds in that, because if you want to be as good faith as possible now, you have to sort of include whatever somebody thinks is canon, because it's up to them. If somebody thinks that all the movies are canon, does want to use feats from the movies. Now, Lotex is going to say later on that this doesn't matter, because he himself doesn't believe that any other feats from the movies or GG or anything like that really help Goku in terms of his overall scaling, which is why he's trying to exclude this statement here, which is just simply ridiculous and shows that he didn't actually look into any of the feats, especially when it comes to certain GT scaling and how you can get that to massively critical wank levels. But the thing is that with this statement, a good faith person has to essentially take it at face value. And you have to say, well, Goku technically can just be composited and it's not incoherent. Just like how Superman is now composited automatically by the writers, well, by the writers, so is Goku. Therefore, if I want to, and just say that, something is canon, I could just use something like 4D God Goku. What, who are you gonna bring? Milkman Man? Milkman Man, at his best interpretation, is a character that can scale to maybe a Raleigh. But we're talking about 4D God Goku, who scales above fiction itself. So, yeah, don't really want to get into that. And Lotex is never going to take that. He probably doesn't even believe in an argument based around that. Because, of course, he doesn't have any substantiation to disprove it. He just doesn't believe in it. That's his evidence. Is, I don't believe in it. Anywho, the point being that you can just simply take that. Or I can just take CC Goku. I can just take Xeno Goku. It doesn't even actually matter if they're shown to be different people, because they're all canon. They're all canon unto itself, and anything that they can do, the other one can do. Any hacks, any abilities that is shown to be done by any version of Goku can just be consistently scaled towards what you think is canon, and you can add them into however you want. And so, a good faith interpretation means you also have to composite Goku whenever you're talking about this conversation. This is why I granted Superman his composite earlier in regards to the DC Medals event. This is why I granted it, because I'm like, fine, we can be charitable, but you have to do the same for Goku, which Lotex is unwilling to do here.
This video, I'm going to be sticking to the things that at some point have been referred to as part of some sort of official history or original work, which would be the Z into Super continuity of both the anime and manga. So no movies, GT, Daima, or video game scaling, with only the latter having any scaling that's better than Super anyways.
You little
pussy.
You see what I mean, gang? This is what I'm talking about. He's like, oh, well, I have to do this type of weirdo thing just so I don't have to get Goku above Superman. So I'm not going to include all the stuff. I'm not going to include all the stuff. And he can get away with it. The reason why he can get away with it is because he is somewhat taking at face value. So this is what he considers canon. And for him to say that this is the final answer when even Toyotaro's piece on canonicity is literally opinion-based, for him to have the audacity to say that this is the final answer, even though he's just going off of his interpretation and opinion, because guess what? He's like, oh, official, what do you mean by official? Because official doesn't have the same claim that you think it does. Because anything that's officially licensed by a Dragon Ball source company in any capacity, and is officially licensed, is official, you dumb idiot.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
And I went this whole time without doing any level of insults, but come on, this is why I said it gets to the points of being ridiculous. It gets to the points of being fucking ridiculous. Like, how stupid are you? Like, come on, man. You're not no official source. You're not the final answer. You're not any of that. You're just an opinionated idiot, okay? Who's, quite frankly, a little bit illiterate. But it's this very weasel way that he does it, to try to wiggle out of it, and try to use terms like official, and it's like, bro, what are you talking about? Especially if you want to talk about Daima being excluded. Daima is the official new stage in canon, if you want to sit there and use that. So what are you talking about, you complete big-headed buffoon? That's Toriyama. That's, who is more official than Toriyama himself? That's Toriyama's dream project. You complete donkey. Like, what are you talking about? No, I'm gonna exclude things like Daima and stuff like that. So even in his, the final answer, even in his, oh, I'm only gonna go off the official material. What's more official than the author himself? That's where Daima comes from, you complete dejected moron. Anyway, that's besides the point. This is really the crux of his argumentation and why he's not going to take the whole everything is canon and then apply it and then try to use what he would be doing if he was good faith argument for Goku versus Superman, because you had to take everything.
Saiyan Saga, Raditz, and Nappa easily defeat the prior arc's main villain Piccolo, establishing that top tiers could easily destroy the planet with explosions so large they might be able to blow up any planet regardless of size, or maybe even destroy stars. The Namek arc continued with this trend, Vegeta getting repeatedly beaten down by Frieza and his henchmen as power levels massively escalated hundreds of times over to reach consistently into that star-busting tier, the anime version of the arc potentially concluding with beyond solar system level explosions.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god, stop fucking lying.
Frieza would return only to be instantly cut in half by Trunks, man far weaker than the androids, who were powerless against Cell, who could blow away the solar system and threaten the existence of all life in the universe. The
threat to the universe, as in he can wipe it out in either a substantial amount of time, or he can wipe it out altogether. Consistently, Cell is shown to be and stated to have infinite bottomless battle power. Even the narration continues on that front, that he has infinite battle power. Meaning that if you want to sit there and talk about universal to even high universal scaling, it starts back with Frieza to get to those universal realms, and then it goes all the way up until Cell being into those high universal realms. And considering the structures of solar systems and galaxies inside of Dragon Ball, it's certain that Cell's power output wasn't just going to destroy, quote-unquote, a solar system, but was going to destroy even a galactic nebula. This is kind of proof positive that they are in those realms of power.
The arc would further escalate the scale of power, with the weakest form of Buu literally one-shotting Dabura, a man who was more powerful than Cell, with the stronger forms of Buu easily wielding power that could wipe out the entire living universe and maybe even the realms beyond it.
With Buhan's feat being able to destroy the living universe, keep in mind the living universe is already composed of 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal dimension, meaning that just the living universe alone is a 4D space structure. Meaning that Buhan being able to crush that and Kid Buu being able to make it go poof in an instant already puts them towards anywhere between high universal to low multiversal in terms of their ranges of power. With Kid Buu's statement of being able to make it go poof being more to those low multiversal ranges.
Even with the movies and continuations like Dragon Ball GT, there was no feat, in my opinion, that escalated Goku's power to a new, particularly multiversal tier.
Hey, could you run that by me again?
Even with the movies and continuations like Dragon Ball GT, there was no feat, in my opinion, that escalated Goku's power to a new, particularly multiversal tier.
That's what I thought you said. Now let me offer this as a rebuttal.
You need to shut the fuck up.
definitely got stronger, but by the time you hit the universal level, to be anything beyond universal requires a beyond infinite increase in power, something that no amount of misinterpreted guidebooks or Super Saiyan 4 multipliers can achieve. Dragon Ball Super anime and manga righted this wrong by clearly stating and showing that Goku and Beerus's punches were going to destroy not only the living universe, but literally everything else in Universe 7, including the Demon Realm, the multiple realms of the afterlife, and the Kai world. All of which are separate space-times, which are comparable to the universe. This feat is pretty much as blatant as a low multiversal feat can get.
Taking his version of the lowest possible scale that you can go for, a feat like this would still be considered at least 7th dimensional. This puts you well into the high multiversal ranges of power, not as a low multiversal feat. To destroy the macrocosm, which could be considered 7D, considering how the universe is structured and how they observe each other, and for which they scale higher than each other, if you just want to sit there and use mathematical spatial dimensions for it as the lowest interpretation that you can, and not the actual interpretation of scale, which, by the way, I don't even have to use a macrocosm. We'll get into why Goku can get outer without the macrocosm scaling later, but the thing is like, even if you don't want to consider it outer or whatever, because you're misinterpreting the statements, that's perfectly fine. Doesn't really matter, but it will at least still get you a 7th dimensional structure, which scales way higher than even what Low Takes is putting the feat at.
Some have argued that this feat is far beyond multiversal, mostly due to several statements about the Otherworld. Some argue that due to these statements, the Otherworld is actually an outer-versal realm that completely transcends dimensional structures based on the description page from the Dazenshu. However, pretty much every capable translation of this page does not imply this in the slightest.
It's the description page from the Dazenshu alone, which, by the way, the Dazenshu is an officialized source, so I don't know why he's over here trying to dismiss it. Again, it's just weasel tactics they say to try to use to dismiss it. It's not just a claim that it's outerversal, it's based around the idea that it is outerversal. Keep in mind, it applies itself to the mini-worlds structure. It applies itself to the mini-worlds outline. This is something that's based directly off of Chinese mythology when it comes to things like Sun Wukong. Why? Because, well, you guessed it, that's what Goku is based off of. Toriyama has basically put that out several times in regards to the interpretation for how you can describe the otherworld. And even in the scans that he's going to sit there and pull up, in his own scans that he pulls up for his translation, when it talks about transcending all dimensions, like, what does he think transcendent means? Because keep in mind, when he uses the transcendent languages for boundless Superman, for extra dimensional Superman, that's perfectly fine to use that. But it's not perfectly fine to use it for Dragon Ball? It's now suddenly a misinterpretation to use it for Dragon Ball when they say blatantly, even in the stuff that he shows, that it transcends all dimensions and perspectives for the worlds that cannot be perceived. Keep in mind, he uses this very same logic for Superman. Like, if you guys go back inside of his own video, you can see that. Because like I said, even in his own scans for the translations himself, and in fact, I will put it up on screen directly from his own translations to show that, as I proved at the beginning, I'm debunking him with his own video. It literally says, the kingdom of heaven, towering above the sky itself, transcending all dimensions known to men, a world beyond his perception. What are you talking about, Low Takes? Even his own translations debunk him. But going even further, using the other one, because it doesn't even debunk anything that I'm saying, a realm of supernatural forces governed by the gods. Supernatural being towards metaphysical. Metaphysical realities being transcendent. Again, because it's based off of Sun Wukong. It's based off of their mythological interpretation of metaphysics. And it exists and transcends beyond them. Again, he also just wanted to be devoided of the idea of using things like the World of Void, which doesn't have the concept of time and space. He doesn't want to use things like the intertransmission realm. He doesn't want to use the fact that the afterlife is said to transcend beyond time and space. He doesn't want to use that. Don't want to use it. They're devoid of the concepts and transcend beyond them because they transcend beyond all dimensional realities and possibilities. That's what the realm does. Thus, if it transcends a true concept, an abstract concept such as time and space, completely transcends it and is completely devoid of it, then, my friend, that makes it what? Outerversal, of how we describe outerversal. It's very hard to actually get fictional characters to outerversal. Even for characters that you want to wank, like in DC with people trying to wank Superman outerversal. It's very actually hard to do that. You need to be very precise. But there is a way that we try to come to when it comes to some level of consistency when it kind of scales somebody to outerversal, and that's being beyond true form concepts. So being beyond true form concepts in the idea that abstractional concepts, things that govern the fundamentals of all reality and creation, such as time and space, transcending them in their entirely, such as the arguments with even Jiren transcending time itself, further escalating the idea of transcending in terms of being outerversal, considering that Goku, of course, is transcending by shaking the realm of void, all of that. is the idea of being able to transcend.
It's just another universe. It's just another universe. Unfortunately, like I mentioned before, it doesn't really matter how many times Goku multiplies his power or surpasses his full power in his base form, because that would still be in the low multi to multiversal tier.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
In the Goku Black arc, probably the most impressive canon feat in all of Dragon Ball occurs. It's just that Goku isn't the one doing it, and it's when Zeno erases future Trunks' timeline. Now, due to the nature of timelines in Dragon Ball, this would actually be a low complex multiversal feat, or 5D. The issue is that Goku obviously never scales to Zeno's power, and literally no one in Dragon Ball, Angel, God of Destruction, or otherwise. Now, potentially, you could argue that Zamasu was beginning to reach a similar tier of power, as he was beginning to be felt and appear in the present timeline, but he never actually does anything, and this could have just been a hacks ability gained from becoming a universe.
Oh, fuck off.
Keep in mind, although Goku does not scale to Zeno's full power, the feat in which Zeno performed, Goku literally said he could essentially perform the same type of feat. He could have done the same thing if he just had one more sense of being. So to essentially dismiss it and just ignore the blatant statements that says that Goku could do that same type of feat, again, that's not Zeno's full power, by the way. I'm sorry, does Lotex think that that was Zeno at full power? Because when he says this doesn't scale to Zeno's power, what is he implying there? Does Zeno use full power in order to do that, even though he casually just did it?
Fuck.
But whatever, again, Lotex should hang up his cape. He's not a Dragon Ball scaler. It's applicable to him because he has no idea what scaling actually is. At this point, he's terrible. And people are going to say,
but he's bigger than you.
Or they're going to use his success. They're going to use fallacious argumentation like,
oh, but he has 70,000 subscribers. Oh, this video has 21,000 plus views, and he has a bunch of likes. He has like 100K likes. Or
I don't think he has like 100K likes on this video. I would have to actually look at that. But, and it's like, if you're still using that fallacious argumentation, that you have a bunch of idiots who also don't know anything about scaling, who just are convinced because pretty lights, cool edits, and a guy who just throws some random things at the screen, you are one of those low IQ henchmen. So, I don't expect the normies who don't know anything about scaling who just watch this video because, oh, it seems to be entertaining, and I like both of these characters, and I'll just watch it. Yeah, it doesn't really seem to have any intrinsic value that would be purposeful here.
Strength should be able to do something similar. This might be supported by a handful of statements from guides describing a character's power as beyond the dimension or superdimensional, which arguably might mean 5D as well.
And look, when it comes to the super dimensional, this is only further scaling into those higher dimensional planes of reality. But of course, Lotex says it might be 5D. He can't even take, even most low ballers of Dragon Ball won't even sit there and say that that's not 5D. Even most of the low ballers out there aren't going to let you get away with saying that that's not at least 5D. But then Lotex said, oh no, it's only possible that it's 5D. Like, I don't understand how retarded do you have to be? Like, I hate to use the R slur here in this context, but there are some people who are just functionally retarded, okay? But no, just no.
Oh, no.
Usually within context, dimensions just means literally alternate dimensions rather than higher mathematical spatial ones.
That is not what that means in Dragon Ball. Specifically in what you're talking about with Buhan, you complete buffoon. You only use, I love how he says usually, but only uses that arc. He only uses evidence from that arc to try to say, well, that's what usually it means. No, you complete moron, and that's not how an argument works. God, like, man, I don't know how anyone can be this dumb. No, it's not. That's not the usual. There's no amount of good faith interpretation that would allow Superman to be Goku at his current stage. Don't get me wrong, Superman has elevated himself way past that point, and to kind of go into that scaling a little bit, Superman's scaling is a lot higher tier than what a lot of people think it is. Trust me, if I want to be as charitable as possible and even take things like his feats with the World Forger, which are going to be out of context and misinterpreted by most people, you can still get Superman into those higher sixth dimensional realms of power, and I can even apply that consistently. Hell, you might even be able to scale Superman slightly higher than that. But to be within those complex multiversal ranges of power consistently, of where Superman would scale, which is where that's actually the scale for Superman and not the scale for Goku, which, by the way, Lotex doesn't even apply that scale to Goku. He says it only applies to Zeno, and he implies that that's Zeno's full power, that he's only at low. He doesn't even say complex multiversal in its standing. He says low complex multiversal. Okay. But anyway, to be within those complex multiversal to high complex multiversal powers, potentially even reaching those hyperversal realms of power, I mean, for crying out loud, I personally never thought Superman would be this strong. Definitely is that strong. Like, most people who still think Superman is universal, I think that you, like Low Takes, is pretty low IQ. You're pretty low IQ if you think Superman at this point is just still universal at his best. Like, no. Taking him as good faith as possible, even with the best interpretations, he is within those 6-dimensional ranges of power. With that being said, it just is clear that Goku is in those outerversal structures, even just based off of everything that I said. However, I don't even need that. I don't need it. Why? Because Goku scales higher than Aurelie. Aurelie? Well, I'll just go ahead and put the feat on screen. I'll just go ahead and put the feats on screen. So that way you can see that, yeah, it doesn't really matter, because, I mean, that already is outerversal. That already is just outerversal alone. And even if you want to do Low Takes and just only use Dragon Ball Super's timeline, only use strictly Dragon Ball Super, well, Goku matches her. So, at least by Super Saiyan Blue. And then if you want to use guidebooks and you want to use guide statements that says Ultra Instinct, in the anime anyway, surpasses Lord Beerus? Potentially? Potentially? Maybe? Or at least it's somewhere around the realm of Lord Beerus. Then he still would supersede and be able to beat Aurelie with MUI. But, even as Super Saiyan Blue, he's able to match her blow for blow. Meaning that, at least out of Super Saiyan Blue, he's at least outerversal. Even if you want to say that it's not base Goku, perfectly fine. At least at his strongest, he's outerversal. Like I said, I'm just leaving up Aurelie's feats on screen because that's enough said. Superman has never even come close to anything remotely close to that.
But that is the end of this video, guys. I have literally talked my booty off and my throat is starting to hurt. Pause. There's other stuff, other works inside the pipeline. It is coming down, all that good stuff, yada yada yada. But Low Takes, I'm not going to ask you to be better, because I know that you won't be. I mean, when it comes to your Dragon Ball scaling, you're one of the worst Dragon Ball scalers ever. You're very much a normie when it comes to scaling. So if you just let me read directly a feed off the page, right? If you want to sit there and read a feed directly off the page like Master Roshi blowing up the moon and you say that's moon level, then fine, yeah. You can still continue to scale Dragon Ball on that. But if you want to talk about anything related to Dragon Ball versus other series, stop scaling. Stop scaling, buddy.
Unfortunate truth is that there is really no amount of good faith interpretation that allows Goku to beat Superman. Superman not only has the benefit of essentially more than twice the history of Goku from a pure time standpoint, but also benefits from literally thousands of other comic stories that flesh out the absolute gargantuan scale of the DC cosmology that he's not even in. Something a singular guidebook page from a Daizenshu couldn't possibly hope to match. This analysis has only focused on power, but in pretty much every other metric, Superman consistently has Goku beat.
So that was a fucking lie.
Speed feats and consistent speed scaling, Superman blitzes. Hacks abilities, Goku doesn't have anything Superman hasn't seen before, and the stat difference leaves no opportunity for a conditional victory.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard. Everyone's laughing, by the way, but it's true because everybody's heard it too. Everyone heard it, right? They look at all, everyone's like, yeah, big piece of dog shit.
Goku might be a more skilled martial artist than Superman, but Superman has come across and even been trained by fighters like Batman, who are even better fighters than Goku is.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.